Good afternoon or good morning to you, wherever you may be watching us from today. I'm Steve Seepersod coming to you from the campus of Binghamton University. So glad to have you with us here on this webinar that's part of the Binghamton Learning Network series, just one of the many things that we offer here from the Alumni Association as far as lifelong learning programs for you. So today's program is titled From Film School to the Studios. And we'll have a very interesting talk with Haeyong Moon, our featured speaker for today. We'll talk about her journey into the film industry. So more on that in just a bit. Want to have a few quick free commercials while everybody's paying attention here in the beginning. We recently launched a podcast series, the Binghamton Alumni Podcast. Search for that on Spotify. You'll find a couple of great episodes that we just recently posted. These are short 15 to 20-minute interviews with alumni who are doing interesting things and sharing their stories with us on how they got into their career path, what they're doing, and how they remain involved with Binghamton University. The Binghamton Alumni Podcast on Spotify, that's there. Check it out, of course, after this webinar is done for today. And something else to take a look at after the webinar, go to binghamton.edu/alumni, our homepage, and there's a link for the alumni travel program, something that we were proud to relaunch this year with 3 great trips coming up here in 2024 in May, and it's hard to believe we're almost through March here. This month went incredibly fast. So it won't be long before the Southwest National Parks trip is going to be happening. That's coming up in May. In August, discover Southeast Alaska. In October, the flavors of Northern Italy. So these are trips where you can discover cool places with other Binghamton University alumni. There's a host that goes along. So you're in good hands with somebody who knows the territory in all of these various locales. Binghamton.edu/alumni. That's our homepage. And there's a link right there for the travel program. After the show, check it out, see what we have to offer, and sign up for one or more trips if you're so inclined. So those are there for the enjoyment of you. And we're happy to offer those. We'll take questions during this hour. We'll have a formal sort of presentation followed by dedicated Q&A time, but we certainly want to mix in your questions midstream. So if you have them, send them our way. I'll put my email address up on the screen with a little banner graphic from time to time, and you can certainly email me your questions, and I'll mix these in when and where we can. You can also send your questions in on Facebook or on the microsite. Same deal there. As soon as the questions come in, we'll see them, and where it makes sense, we'll bring those in. And then at the end, we'll have some time for questions as we close out and get to 1 o'clock Eastern. And we keep this going. It's not a hard stop from our end. So if we get great questions and some great thought-provoking comments, and we keep going on past 1 o'clock, that's great. We're here for you, and so we're happy to make the time. So now, without any further delay, we'll bring in our featured speaker for today, a member of the class of 1999, Haeyong Moon, who comes to us from Los Angeles. So I said good morning in the introduction. It's 9 o'clock where she is. And so this is her starting the day, where for us on the East Coast, this is kind of in the middle at lunchtime. Certainly glad to have you with us. And Haeyong is going to tell us about her journey from Binghamton University and the various activities and pursuits she had here on campus to pursuing a full-time career in the movie industry. There's a lot of stuff I wrote down on the sheet here, but rather than read it, I'll let you tell it. We're very glad to have you with us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks, Steve. That was a very amazing introduction. Thank you. Hi, my name is Haeyong Moon. I'm an independent filmmaker here based in Los Angeles. I've been in Los Angeles for 23 years. Like Steve mentioned, I graduated from Binghamton in 1999. It's exactly 25 years ago this year. And so this opportunity, when it came up to, if there was any topics that I would like to cover for a webinar during the pandemic, I was thinking about what could I share, and I reflected on my journey since Binghamton and remembering the film student that I was there. I thought it would be great to kind of talk through what I did, what kind of obstacles I had to endure, and how I got here. So let's start with the first slide, the second slide. I hope there are some Binghamton cinema students listening in today. This photo might look familiar to some of you. It's the photo of Lake Charles 6 in Binghamton. I actually took this photograph, I think the week before I graduated. So it might look a lot better now, but that's how it looked back in '99. On the top left, you see those square portals, holes. That's where the projection booth is, and that's where I spent a lot of my time. I was a film projectionist at Binghamton, projected for a lot of the film classes. That space to me is very special because I remember seeing a lot of the films that really inspired me, and my sensibility as an artist really was kind of started there in that space. And so when I was preparing for this webinar, I pulled up this photograph from my box of photos, and I kind of tried to focus on who I was at that time and, what would I say to that person, that film student sitting in that classroom. So yeah, I discovered the love of film, cinema at Binghamton. I had great teachers there, Larry Gothheim, Mark Meckelhatton, Jeannie Leota, Ken Jacobs also. Spent a lot of time in that level where the editing rooms are and cutting Super 8, 16 millimeter. I made my first Super 8 film, 1 minute haiku film, 16 millimeter film that I shot on a Bolex, which I bought a Bolex after I graduated because I couldn't live without one. I still have one. But yeah, that was the space where I really discovered that film was going to be a lifelong thing for me. It was an attraction that I couldn't ignore. Originally, when I started Binghamton, I was actually a pre-law student. I thought I was going into the law school path and, kind of have that secure path ahead of me. But I started taking film classes, and it just kind of, it changed my path altogether. So in '99, I graduated, and I got a job in New York City. My first job was working at a photo lab. It was a darkroom in Union Square. And for 8 hours a day, I was processing and printing black and white film. That was something that I also did at Binghamton. I used the darkrooms on campus and spent a lot of time printing, which is one of those photos that I printed was this photograph you're seeing. So yeah, and then at night, I would also project films and video works at Anthology Film Archives in New York City, which was a nice connection from Binghamton because some of you may know Binghamton cinema department is heavily focused on avant-garde experimental films. And so a lot of the artists that we learned about also screened their films at Anthology. So I got to be in that world and community for a couple of years. And, the pay wasn't great for either of those jobs, but I really thought that I had the best, 2 jobs in the world at the time. I was very young. I was early 20s, and I really loved, working and handling film in both motion picture and photo films. I felt like a film activist because, I was doing something to keep the medium alive and continuing the traditions of, film photography and experimental films. So from there, 2 years went by. I think I was working in New York, and I decided that I still wanted to do my own filmmaking and kind of explore what I wanted to say through film. And my teacher, Larry, told me, why don't you look for grad school? And so I was recommended 2 schools. Chicago Art Institute was one of them, and CalArts in California here in Los Angeles was another one. I had visited Chicago the year prior because I was doing a road trip, and I spent a week in Chicago, and I loved the museum there. And so I thought that was my top school. Like I wanted to go to Chicago. So, but I needed a backup school, so I sent in 2 applications the same time portfolios, recommendations, everything to Chicago and CalArts. And a week or maybe a month went by, and I got a call from CalArts saying, we received your application and, we would love to have you here. And it was a welcoming phone call from one of the faculty members, and they offered me a great scholarship. But I was still hoping that I would have a chance to go to Chicago. And so I waited, but it turns out they never got my application material. So it got returned to me with a note saying that the admissions office never opened it. It arrived late, so we apologize, but you won't be considered for this year. And so the decision was made for me. That's how I came out to Los Angeles, a school that I had not even visited. The only thing I knew about CalArts were that it was a good animation school and that it had Charlie Hayden as one of the teaching faculty member in the jazz school. Jazz was another love of mine. So to me, it seemed like, it was worth a shot to go to CalArts. And so I packed my things in 2001 and I moved out to Los Angeles with $700 in my checking account. I'm not even lying. That is all I had at the time. And I really thought that was enough to get me started. And I came out to CalArts. And if you go to the next slide, that is the theater at CalArts, the Bijou Theater. I don't know if there are any CalArts alumni on this call, I doubt it. But instantly they would recognize it because it is the theater for the film school as well as a school. It fits about 150 people. It's got a nice marquee on the outside. It has a 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, all types of video, obviously, as well. And I was the head projectionist there. And so I spent a lot of time in that theater projecting visiting artist works, student works, and any kind of courses that they, the films that they would show. CalArts was a dream place for me. Because I was such a curious person, I was able to kind of explore the different disciplines in the different schools, took animation courses, took figure drawing, I took a jazz class, and I collaborated with a jazz bassist. I did a thing where I made a silent film in 16 millimeter. It was, I think, 8 minutes, and I projected it in the Bijou Theater, silent. And then I ran it again the second time with live accompaniment with a jazz bassist. And it was a really great screening that I did. And I think that all of that comes from what I started at Binghamton. I was, like I said, the film projectionist at Binghamton, spent a lot of time there. The faculty members at CalArts a few of them were heavily influential documentary filmmakers. And so I eventually kind of expanded into that world. I realized that, from Binghamton, I was kind of learning to discover the visual language and kind of an abstract, expressionistic, that language. But when I came to CalArts, and I was, getting a little bit older, and so I was more mature, I was realizing that I really was interested in capturing people and the ordinary life that unfolds in our everyday experience. And so I think the documentarian that I am today kind of comes from CalArts. This theater to me is extremely special, as you can imagine. I took this photograph 5 years ago because I was visiting CalArts because Larry Gottheim, who was the teacher from Binghamton, was doing a visiting lecture at Cal Arts. So he flew out here to LA. He was showcasing some of his newer works, and I had to make that trip. So I actually took a day off from work, and I actually drove up to Valencia, where Cal Arts is located, and to see his film. And it was just an amazing moment to be in that theater to watch Larry's films. Let's see. Okay, so 2004 is when I graduated. If you want to go to the next slide. So I talked a lot. Let's see, I talked about 10 minutes already. That kind of covers my journey from Binghamton to Cal Arts. So that's about a 5-year span. I wanted to kind of highlight those dots, between the dots. A lot has happened from 99 to 2004. I mean, the world changed drastically, as you all know. Personally too, there a lot went through those periods. A lot of self-doubt, a lot of uncertainties about, was it the right decision to declare myself as a cinema major when I was a, pre-law student at the time. And, there were a lot of moments where I wasn't sure if this was the right path I should be taking. But I think looking back, the main thing that made me go forward or move forward is that love that I had for film. And somehow it was so strong that it's kind of pushed me forward. And, as you can imagine, my school years were very intense. I was a grad student, but also staff, because I was projecting 4 or 5 classes every semester. So a lot of times my day would start at 9 a.m. and end at 11 p.m. But after those intense years at Cal Arts, I graduated and I needed a job. I was back to square one. Los Angeles in 2004 was very different from New York City in 1999. There were 0 film labs, photo labs. So I couldn't go back into that world and see if I could work in a film lab or a film photo lab. So I kind of looked through everything that I could find in terms of jobs. And the thing that I found was working as a Korean translator for a subtitle company. And because I am Korean and I'm bilingual, I was able to utilize that. This company was making subtitles for major studios for feature films and TV series. So at the time, I worked on the Korean subtitles for episodes of Seinfeld, Friends, Everybody Loves Raymond, because they were making DVDs in a global market. And so somehow I kind of got into that world. And a year later, a recruiter from Warner Brothers contacted me because they wanted to see if I'd be interested in a position at Warner Brothers DVD production. So that's kind of how I first got my first job in the studios. I wasn't somebody who was looking for a job in the studios. I was such a pure, passionate film student that I didn't have the mind to be looking at the industry and seeing how I could network. I was very shy, so I didn't know anything about networking, didn't know anybody who was working in the studio system. So to me, luck played a lot in my life journey. I was given opportunities. I put in the work, obviously. I was always very serious about what I was asked to do, and I did do it well, and I tried to make sure I do it well. So 2005, I started working for Warner Brothers. A few years later, I started to feel restless again. feeling that it was a repetitive job. I didn't feel like I was making personal projects. I felt like I was wasting my time, So I quit. And, there would be 2 or 3 years where I would work, and then I would go into some kind of freelance job, working on translation projects or video editing projects on the side. I would do some traveling, and then I would go back to working. So all these dots in between 2005, 2010, 2015, those are times where I was going through stuff. But somehow in 2010, again, I got another job at Warner Brothers, this time in TV distribution. So I was the in-between person from production to all the TV broadcast stations in the country that was feeding TV shows like Extra or People's Court, or they call it the first run shows. I did that for a few years. And then again, I started to feel like there must be something else that I could do. Maybe there's something else out there. That was also around that same time when I started working on my first feature-length documentary film. So around 2009 when I started that project, and that was Broadway Treasures is the title, and it's about the historic theaters in downtown Los Angeles. You could probably see why I'm so in love with theaters based on the 2 photographs I showed you. I really believe that the moment I stepped into a movie theater, something changed in me. There was like a fuse that got lit in my system, and it's whatever you call it, a bug or something. It's just the attraction is so strong that it's almost becomes an obsession. And so the theaters in downtown Los Angeles, these are almost 100 years old theater buildings with old, very intricate designs inside, and the marquees still intact outside. When I first saw them in downtown Los Angeles, I just needed to know everything about them. And about 10 years later and 90 plus interviews later, I was able to finish that documentary. And it is a documentary. I think it still has some of my experimental background in it, but it is a documentary with a lot of talking heads. And I was able to finish that and showcase that at the Globe Theater, which is the photo you saw in the first slide, with my name and the title of the film and the marquee. It's one of, those photos that I will remember in my dying, the moment before I die, I'm probably going to remember that image because it has such a big meaning for me. So 2000 around 15 is when I realized that I needed to get back into a steady job again. And I, again, was very fortunate because DreamWorks Animation was, a place that I knew of, but I never considered working there. I wasn't an animator. Yes, I went to CalArts and I knew a lot of animators, but I didn't see a way into that. But they had a position in post-production, and it was more of a project management role where you're dealing with various TV programs that were being created, and this person was the one sending it to Netflix or the streaming platforms. And I applied for it, and I got called in for an interview. And in that interview, what's stuck out in my head now is that the hiring manager, asked me some questions, and it was maybe 13 minutes into the interview. So it was a short interview. He looks over my resume and he said to me, well, so it looks like you're a smart person. You'll probably get the work done, but it seems like you've been jumping around every 2-3 years. So yeah, if we did hire you, what's going to happen 2-3 years later? And he asked me that, and I thought to myself, wow, he's really like seeing right through me. But I actually did have a right answer for him at the time. And my answer at the time was, yes, I did jump around. I felt restless in my past jobs, and I did do that, but I'm actually at a point in my life where I'm ready to put my roots down. And I'm hoping that this is the place. This is that place. And the interview ended and I got the job. And DreamWorks has been the place. I've been there working at DreamWorks for 9+ years. I never thought that I would be a person who would stay at one place for that long. But it has been a really good place for me where I could work on my personal film projects outside of work and find time to do that, and also meet a lot of people who have passion projects that I can talk to over lunch and be encouraged by, or to share my progress with them, and they could share things with me. And I also run a documentary film club at work, which is an extension of, all my film school days. I obviously love talking about movies, and I love encouraging people to watch a film together in a theater. I have various friends at DreamWorks now, and two of them are the projectionists there. So you can see that my connection to theaters and anything that involves film and cinema is still a very strong part of me, important part of me. Let's see. I feel like I've been babbling on quite a bit, but I think I've covered most of my journey. Yes, in 2021, I started a new film project. It's going to be about a jazz pianist that I really admire. And I've interviewed about 30 people thus far. So, I'm hoping to start editing this summer, and hopefully I can get the music and the sound mix and all of that happening end of this year. That's my plan. I think what I would like to share is that you have to put in, with any industry or any field that you want to get into, you have to be punctual. You have to show up on time. You have to be respectful for everyone's time. And, you have to earn your respect as well by being dependable to others. And I think with that in mind, if you keep those things in mind, you will find your path wherever you are, even if you only started with $700, which was my case. And, when I was preparing for this webinar, I wanted to frame this as an opportunity for me to speak to myself 25 years ago. So that student sitting in, Electoral 6, she had no idea what she wanted to do. Her parents didn't really understand what she wanted to do either. But somehow, whatever it was strong enough, and it's carried me this far. And so, I want to encourage those who are either graduating or have graduated a few years ago and looking to find their next thing. If you feel strongly about film making or art making, I would say keep doing it, listen to yourself, and do what you can to keep that fuse lit, because it is a very special thing to have that in you. And, it's a gift that we don't really take it seriously sometimes. So what else? I think I would remind some of you or those who know people who are graduating or wanting to look into, work in the film studios. Believe in your vision, work hard, and, take every opportunity seriously, because you never know. You never know what kind of job you're going to be asked to do in the next point. Even myself, like I'm looking at my dots and my journey from Binghamton CalArts to now. I actually don't know how this happened. And I can only say that I've just worked hard each step of the way. I was very serious and passionate about everything that I did. And that's kind of what has brought me to this point. Yeah.
Probably a good opportunity to break in with some questions. And so I was listening to this story, and it's really quite interesting to hear the journey since leaving Binghamton and going to graduate school and getting into the industry and the projects that you've worked on. And I'll go ahead and just change up the screen here a little, bring in this graphic. So we're starting to get questions. Send me questions by email, and we'll mix these in. And we've got quite a lot of time to chat. I wrote down a bunch of questions too, and I'll ask a few, and I'll mix one in that just came up by email. But as I was looking at the timeline here
Yeah.
of your career and seeing different things happening, sometimes concurrently, it made me think of people who work in broadcasting where they have a full-time gig that's, the bulk of their time and income are from that, and they also have some freelance ventures and different side gigs, and so it's not uncommon to see a broadcaster with two, maybe three different jobs all at the same time. And I'm kind of curious, if this is a typical thing in films where you've had a couple of jobs that were maybe a little bit more on the business side than the creative, and then the creative outlet got explored through the independent projects, and the one that you mentioned in particular about the vintage theaters.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because I know a lot of my peers who graduated from Binghamton or CalArts, the paths that they took were teaching. Some became editors. Some became, something more into the creative world, animators, graphic artists, etc. My path has always been a little bit more business and on the technical side. And I think it might be because I also have a lot of technical interest. Being that I was a projectionist, I like using my hands to get things done. I also really cherish my creative side. And so, after I graduated, I did try to see if I wanted to work in editing, use my creative ability for different projects, but somehow it just didn't work for me. And, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it was, it didn't work out that way. And, to this day, I treat my work and life kind of separately. And that seems to work for me well. The balance, I've finally able to, find that work-life balance. And but I think it is common. Sometimes people are able to find their work life, that is somewhat more creative. But for me, it has been separate.
Now, you hinted at something a little bit earlier
Mm.
in talking about the early part of your career, and I was going to ask about the differences between working in the industry in New York versus working in Los Angeles. And I know the time in New York was very early in your career, and certainly now it's going to be different in some ways. But especially as we think about having students that are part of the webinar today, or maybe people who are out there in the world but early in their career and maybe trying to weigh one versus the other, what sorts of differences should people keep in mind that might be helpful to kind of think about where would I fit better as far as being in New York or LA?
That's a really good question, and I don't know if I'm the right person to answer it. I feel like my 2 years of working experience I had in New York was so different from the type of work I'm doing here. Um, Also, the world was so different back in '99, and but in terms of Los Angeles versus New York, the big difference is, I mean, the cityscape. It's just completely different. And I'm talking obviously about Manhattan and New York. Um, the interactions are very different. So I imagine the networking and the work life is probably very different. I don't know if, for instance, in Los Angeles, in my work life, I commute, I take my car, drive, and, it's not a bad commute. About 20 minutes, I get to work, I drive in and I park my car. And there's this very fluid work life that I don't think would be possible in New York, because you're most likely on the subway around, surrounded by a lot of people. There's probably a lot of interactions, even from getting home, leaving your home to starting your day in your office. So comparing even that commute or the work life, even that 1 hour of your work life, it just seems drastically different. And also the people are definitely different. I think that is impacted by the interactions that you have in the city. Los Angeles is very, you can definitely mingle and go into neighborhoods that is a little bit more interactive, but most of LA life is, within your own bubble. You drive in your own car, you get to work, and you interact with the people that you work with. There's, unless you are out constantly, to a busy section of Los Angeles, there's really not a lot of interaction with strangers. And I think that impacts the way you become and probably impacts the way how work life is. Having experienced both New York and Los Angeles, I see positives in both. And even though I am now used to this atmosphere in Los Angeles, having lived here for 20 years, I do miss just going into a busy city and just interacting with people, sparking small talks with strangers. I still love doing that, standing on the grocery store line, the line, and just talking to somebody behind me. Like, these are things that I think comes from me being in New York rather than me, living here. And, honestly, in the film industry in Los Angeles, there are a lot of people from New York or a lot of people from the East Coast. So I think even if you are considering moving out, you shouldn't be too worried, because you will find similar, people that you're familiar with, because there will be somebody from Pittsburgh or Boston or, any of the East Coast, people that you are more familiar with in New York, you will find here.
An interesting contrast in the two locations, and probably um, best decided by what somebody's personality is and how it matches. Are you happier in a place that's a sprawling car culture, or in a place that's walkable, take the subway, and it just feels like wherever you go, somebody's in your space? New
Right.
York is a very, very different place than
Yeah.
LA in a lot of ways, and it's up to the individual. But it's interesting to get those perspectives from your side, having been in both
Mm-hmm.
places, working on the differences in the experience. I'll go now to a question, just switch tabs here on my computer. This comes from a viewer watching the webinar today. He asks, which, if any, filmmakers were you looking at while you were at Binghamton and at CalArt?
Oh, Okay, well, Stan Brackage. We had amazing teachers at Binghamton, and it's such a small community, the experimental cinema, avant-garde film community. So one of my teachers, Mark Meckelhatton, he had access to a lot of really rare films. So we saw, I think, 8mm, the Songs films by Brackage, Lewis Clark, Cal Arts. I got to see a lot of Gunvor Nelson films, which is one of my, all-time favorites. One of my heroes is Agnes Varda, who passed away. She is a French filmmaker. And she came as a visiting artist when I was at Cal Arts. And so I got the opportunity to screen Cleo from 5 to 7 in her print. And yeah, one of the, she came into the booth towards the end of the film and she introduced herself to me. Hi, I'm Agnes. And, I remember feeling like my whole body melted, grabbing her hand or shaking her hand because I couldn't believe that this was happening. She was introducing herself to me. Of course, I know you. Who else? I mean, we saw a lot of documentaries. Raoul Peck was a filmmaker that is still very productive. I saw one of his films at Cal Arts, and I was very influenced by him. Chris Marker is another one that I was very influenced by. Yeah, Binghamton. I feel like this person is probably a Binghamton Cinema grad, so yay.
Speaking of the cinema department,
Yes.
I know you're very passionate about wanting to help current students, and we're quite excited to see when I forward you an email saying that there are students from the cinema department that were interested in watching the webinar and are on with us here today. What sorts of advice would you give to somebody who's a current student as far as they're embarking on getting into an industry that's incredibly competitive? How could they make themselves stand out? What are some things that they should be doing in addition to, apart from, et cetera, their own coursework and maybe pursuits within the department to get the experience that will help them to have the edge when it's time to be out there getting a job?
The making films is, even that phrase, making films, is such a different world we live in. You can make your film on an iPhone or a phone. You can edit it on your phone. So even 25 years ago, we didn't have that. We barely had Avid. I think when I was at Binghamton, the first version of Avid was brought in to our film school, and that was a big deal. At Cal Arts, I remember we had Final Cut Pro, like one of the early versions, and that was a big deal. And you had to sign up because it was very, popular. So you had to sign up to use that editing room to cut something. Whereas now, it's so easy, and I think the tools are getting more accessible. But what you do with it is actually more important. And so I would say focus on what you really want to do and try to make something that is meaningful for yourself, but also the world. I think having that perspective as an artist is truly important, to have a purpose that's bigger than just yourself. Maybe that's me because I'm talking as a documentarian. I want to make something or present something, a slice of life that gives hope to somebody. That's one of my goals as a filmmaker, is to do that. But going back to what I would recommend, I would say if you are a maker, make your films and make it with, strong conviction and a purpose. Put your passion and soul into it and share that. Share it with. Now it's easy to share, right? You can put it on YouTube or share it with some, your teachers, friends, peers, strangers. See what kind of response you get. Take in those feedback, and then work on another one. I would say keep making things. And if you put that much work into something, whether it's a work of art or writing a script or doing whatever, if you keep doing it repeatedly, you'll get to a place when it's going to be so much easier and you're going to do it well, even better than you did before. And there's so much learning experience comes from that, just repeating something. And so I would say keep making your films or projects, passion projects, and put it into a portfolio, send it out to film festivals, put it out on YouTube, get the recognition that you deserve, putting work into something like that. And I'm sure that if you put that on your resume, regardless of what kind of job you're looking for, that will speak for itself, because somebody who puts in that much effort into one thing says a lot about them. And so that would be my advice. Just go out and make your films or projects and do it again and again and again.
Well, it sounds a lot like what would make somebody successful in almost any other endeavor, which is to immerse yourself in it, and you learn a lot and start to connect the dots by doing this more and more. And it's a lot like what you said just now about just go out and shoot, go out and edit, put things together, and hopefully learning and open to feedback and open to honing your craft more and getting better over time. And when you talked about the tools being easier to work with now, you can get the latest iPhone and go out and make a film.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that people get a sort of a false sense of almost security out of that, and they think it's easier than it really is? It seems that, okay, the tools are better, they're smaller, they're easier to work with, but skills development is still as important as any other time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very important, and that's why I think being in film school was a huge benefit for me, because I was able to discover various types of films and filmmakers and regions, world cinema that I would not have known about if I was just watching the typical thing that was on TV. But yeah, I mean, it is getting easier. The tool is getting easier. But like I said earlier, you want to find focus into what you really want to say. What is it that you want to really say about this topic? Coming from the Binghamton cinema route, I think I do look for more of an artistic vision in a film. I mean, honestly, I'm not the person who knows a lot of commercial films these days. Don't watch a lot of TV shows. So, but I do think that works of art, especially cinema, there's so much potential in becoming so much more than what it seems to be used. So I think for new generations and people who are just starting out, working in the field or wanting to become filmmakers, I really would, ask them to see what they really want to say about a specific perception or idea, and just see what purpose they have, what their intent is, and just kind of focusing onto that rather than, the fancy, this is what's cool now, or, that transition was so cool in this music video, and that's why I want to use it. Like, stay away from those decision making, because I feel like that kind of is the easier way to solve a problem, a creative problem. I would focus on what works for you. Is it true to what you're trying to say? And find the art in it. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the technological changes. What other changes in the industry have you noticed since you've been working, and maybe since COVID, as COVID seems to have changed pretty much every walk of life?
Yeah, the past 4 years has been pretty wild, as we all have experienced. Another lucky thing from my journey is that I work in animation, and animation was one field that was actually not impacted by COVID because unlike live action film production, where people are gathered together in a set environment, animation takes place virtually, individually. So our productions never halted. We continued to make our TV shows and films, and we were able to produce our works during COVID and release it even. Since then, we obviously have gone back into the office, and we're now interacting with each other the same way we did before COVID. But there are, still a lot of flexibility in this industry. People who prefer to work from home are now able to do so. So things like that have changed. The working environment has changed. Technology-wise, I think the big topic in the future, that everyone's talking about is AI and how that's going to really impact the animation industry. I mean, obviously, we'll see how that kind of plays out in the next year or so. People are concerned that it is going to take away some of the standard traditional jobs as somebody, for instance, like a visual development artist. These artists are the people who, working with the creative producers or showrunners, they draw character designs or landscapes or things that, showrunners are looking for. But now you can obviously do that with AI. You put in, words to trigger some kind of atmosphere style graphics, and, you can get like 100 variations easily. And so there are obviously jobs that are going to be directly impacted from it. So we'll see how this plays out. But, I think I am a true believer in creative vision and how incredibly special and unique that is. My life kind of says that because, I didn't know much about film when I was a student at Binghamton, and the fact that I'm still mesmerized by that theater space and cinema and film 25 years later, I think says a lot. So I think if we have more people who are true believers of artistic vision, we can, persist. And at the end of the day, I think what artists can do and what their visions will always outlast any computer.
Well, certainly the documentary you produced on the vintage theaters in Los Angeles, that was a great example of your creative vision and voice coming together and telling a story that you felt very passionate about. And curious if there's a project out there, say time and money were not a consideration, what would you want to work on?
Oh man, I have lots of ideas. The one that I'm currently focusing on is about this jazz pianist. Another project, which is kind of applicable to this, and you can kind of see why I'm interested, or I was interested in doing this webinar. I'm fascinated about film schools. Because I just know it from my 2 film school experiences. I'm very familiar with the group of people that actually come to film schools, the various personalities that you can see, the the passion that we all have when we start the film schools, I think I have talked about this project with a few people in the past. Yeah, I would love to make a film, a documentary, I guess, about film schools and just kind of go around the country or maybe go around the world, just interviewing or documenting various film schools and see how it's similar or how it's different or how we can learn from each other. And yeah, the vulnerability that we all have as a film student, because we're just so passionate, and yet, there's only one Spielberg. And so it's an extremely competitive field, and yet there's all these people who are still wanting to do it. Film, movie making, whatever format of that film is, whether it's experimental, documentary, TV, commercial film, independent films, whatever it is, it still takes a lot of hard work and dedication. And the fact that there are so many people who jump into it because they want to be part of that it says a lot about how significant this medium is. And yeah, one day I think I would love to make a film about film schools. Maybe I'll use this footage for some of it.
Certainly are welcome to do that. As somebody that works here on campus and is here every day, always find it fun to people watch, whether I'm over at the Fine Arts Building or sometimes you see people with cameras out doing their thing on campus, and think about everybody has a story, everybody has a story they want to tell, and just seeing them do their thing and to put the content together is really fascinating. Try to get inside the heads of people and hear about their creative vision. And I think that sounds like there'll be a great passion project, if and when you have the time and space to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Just scanning the emails and looking at the clock, we have about 3 minutes left before we come to the top of the hour. And I got an email. It's not so much a question that we'll handle on the air, but this is an email I'll forward to you as somebody that's interested in collaboration potentially. So that's very cool.
Yeah.
I love stuff like that. If we can help
Yeah.
one person do something or make something like that happen, I really feel, man, it was really worth it to get out of bed and do the show, because it's not just for me. And I like doing this, but it's meant to help everybody else out. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's super awesome. That's what I think the Binghamton spirit is all about. And just curious if you have like one more Binghamton story you wanted to share that you didn't get to earlier, to help us close this out. And it's great to see how much passion people have for this university. And I'll share one thing really quick, and maybe it gives time to think of a story you want to share. Is that I was over in the Fine Arts Buildings probably about a year or two ago, and I didn't know the person really any of the context, but you can kind of figure it out quickly when it happened. Was I was on my way out of the building and somebody was coming in, and it was right at that entrance by the doors to the Waters Theater, where you come in and go in the back of the theater into the seating area. And somebody comes in, and without even 2 seconds going by, they said, "Wow, this place is exactly the same as when I was here." And they love that all their memories and everything were still there. It's just something about being in that space. You walk in, the way it smells, just the vintage look of it, and it's like, that the timeless sense of that, and that they appreciated. That was fun to. I don't know who it was. I talked to them. I was just kind of, enjoying seeing them in their moments. So kind of a fun little story to eat up 30 seconds of airtime.
I would feel the same way, because I haven't returned to Binghamton since I graduated 25 years ago. So I probably, even looking at that photograph of Lecture Hall 6 kind of reminds me of that air and the smell and just that feeling and how I felt sitting in there. But a cool story I did remember was Mark Meckelhatton, who was one of my teachers in the cinema program there. He had a bunch of connections, and so he actually brought the film print, 16 millimeter print of Andy Warhol's Chelsea Girls. And for those of you who don't know, it's a 16 millimeter film, double projection. So we have to have two 16 millimeter projectors kind of shooting onto the screen side by side. And there was a whole instruction within the can saying, "Dear projectionist, play reel 1, at the start. After a few, I forget, but like play reel 2, 30 minutes in, and then there's instructions on when to start reel 4. And I remember it went on for a couple of hours, and Mark at the end of it said that was the best projection of Chelsea Girls he's ever seen. So I remember that story as being one of my highlights. Like, I actually projected Andy Warhol's film, but only at Binghamton.
That is great. I think that's a great story to wrap up on, and perfect timing right here at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock where you are. And I know it'll be a busy day for you. So thank you so much for joining us here and sharing your stories with all of us here in the Binghamton universe. And I know the students appreciate it. I know there are alumni who appreciate it, and certainly us here in the alumni office, we do as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And just one quick note, so we'll just pull this up on the screen really fast. Check out the Alumni Podcast on Spotify. Binghamton Alumni Podcast is what to search for. Won't take you more than a few seconds to find it. Go to our homepage, binghamton.edu/alumni, to learn more about the alumni travel program and 3 great trips. So choose the one you like and go and take pictures and send them back to us, and we'll get them around on social media and to help to tell your story as well. So that'll wrap it up here today, and we'll be back with another webinar in about a month and talking about how to take your passion and turn it into a career, talking to 2 Binghamton alumni that started up a nonprofit and a related for-profit business. They had their roots here on campus and had worked in the Center for Civic Engagement, and then turned their passion into an actual occupation and are doing quite well. And so they'll talk about how you can do something similar. We all have that passion, that thing that drives us. And sometimes it's a little bit challenging to turn that into action. And we'll talk about how to make that happen. So that'll wrap it up for us here today. For Haeyong Moon, I'm Steve Seepersaw. Thank you so much for joining us. So we'll see you on the next webinar.